This week on the Brody File, we've got some political heavy hitters as 3 more Republicans jump into the 2016 presidential pool. Mike Huckabee joins the field, and so does Ben Carson, who has a message for the media.
I really don't care what they do because I'm not a politician, and I'm not going to do what's politically expedient. And I'm not going to necessarily do what they think I should do. I'm going to do what's right.
Plus, she's the only woman in this year's Republican field, one-on-one with Carly Fiorina, who's talking politics and talking how Jesus helped her through the tragedies of her life.
I am quite certain that I would not have been able to endure those without a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm just certain of that.
Also, Scott Walker is with us, who tells us how he stands out from the Republican presidential crowd.
Right now, I don't see anybody in this race or anybody else thinking about getting in who has fought the good fight on issue after issue after issue, common sense conservative reforms, and won.
The Brody File has so much political content, we don't know what to do with ourselves. We're on overload, and we're also on across America right now. And welcome everybody to another tantalizing edition of the Brody File. We are finally back here in D.C. in the studio after weeks of chasing candidates across the country in the blazing heat. Now, I must have lost, I don't know, 10 pounds doing that. And then again, I probably gained 10 pounds by eating White Castle and Wendy's on the road. All right, anyhow, either way, we decided it was time to head back to D.C. and into the air-conditioned studio. Another big chase is on, and it's the chase for the White House, and that can only mean one thing: time for the mad scramble. Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina, and Mike Huckabee all joined the GOP scramble and announced their runs for the White House. Now, while Fiorina and Carson are new faces to the presidential field, there are going to be others that are not, like Huckabee. It's his second bid for the White House. This time around, he's got a new attitude, and he's talking tough about radical Islam. Mike Huckabee chose a familiar Arkansas location for his presidential announcement that carries a message for his campaign: hope.
But here in this small town called Hope, I was raised to believe that where a person started didn't mean that's where he had to stop. I always believed that a kid could go from hope to higher ground.
Huckabee, who did well with evangelical voters in 2008, will emphasize a broader populist message this time around. Recently, polling shows his likability ratings are through the roof.
It's good news. It means that people believe that they can trust you, that you say what you mean and you mean what you say. And in this day in politics, I believe this is the most important commodity of all.
Another quality he will need is to show he's tough enough to fight the war on terror. In an attempt to head off that concern, he's striking with ads like this one, comparing radical Islam to a rattlesnake.
You take their heads off with a .410 shotgun or a hoe before they bite you. When we look at something that is inherently evil, like radical jihadism, let's quit kidding ourselves and pretending that we're going to have some negotiated settlement, because we're not. They believe that they're here on earth to kill every last one of us in the name of God. God bless you.
Team Huckabee is hoping a combination of tough talk with a down-home nature will be the winning ticket in 2016. That was Mike Huckabee here on the Brody File. Now, as for newcomer Carly Fiorina, she may not have any experience as an elected official, but she is very comfortable with taking on a leadership role. Recently, the former Hewlett-Packard executive sat down with us and spoke confidently about her experience with foreign policy as well as her relationship with Jesus Christ. Take a look.
I want to ask you a national security question or defense question. You know, you got the Rand Paul wing of the party, so to speak. I say the wing of the party. You have folks that feel a little bit more on the libertarian side of foreign policy, and Lindsey Graham on the other side. Where do you see yourself exactly? I'm not trying to put Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul as two opposite ends, but where do you see yourself as it relates to that neocon label we hear so much about as it relates to handling world affairs?
Well, first, I think that America has to face outward into the world. because the world is a more dangerous and a more tragic place when America isn't leading. And even people who are our adversaries understand that the world is a different place when we are leading. And so today, I think, unfortunately, we have a situation where our allies have decided they can't count on us, and our adversaries have decided they don't have to worry about us. And they're both right, unfortunately. Our allies have asked us for a lot of very specific things that would be helpful right now. I mean, the Kurds have asked us to arm them, we haven't. The Egyptians have asked us to share intelligence, we won't. The Jordanians have asked for bombs and materiel, we haven't provided it. The moderate Syrian rebels, when they once existed, had asked for support, we didn't give it to them. We should rebuild the 6th Fleet in NATO to push back on Vladimir Putin. And by the way, I know many of these people, so I know that's what they're saying. I sat in Bibi Netanyahu's office 5 years ago. There were just 3 people in that office, him, me, and my husband Frank. And he was talking about Iran for an hour and a half, because they really are a danger, and we really do need to handle them differently than our president has been. On the other hand, war is always a last resort. There are many things that putting American boots on the ground won't help. We mismanaged going into Iraq in a terrible way, just as we mismanaged coming out. We were foolish when we thought we could build a central government in Afghanistan, just like we were foolish when we thought we could build a central government in Iraq, which now is coming apart piece by piece. But just as going to war is a last resort, having the strongest, most powerful, most capable military force in the world is a necessity, and everyone has to know it.
Your faith journey, and you know, join the crowd when I'm sure we're a bit like this. I mean, boy, we all just kind of go through it, ups and downs. So that's what life is, I guess. Tell me a little bit about yours, because I know that, especially in that 2009-2010 period, breast cancer, Lorianne, what was that like for you, and what kind of low points and maybe eventually rising from the ashes kind of higher points you took? If you can share that with us.
Well, battling cancer and the death of our younger daughter, Lorianne, I am quite certain that I would not have been able to endure those without a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm just certain of that. And I am forever grateful that I rediscovered a personal relationship with God before that happened. I grew up knowing I had a personal relationship with Jesus. I prayed every day all my life, but somehow in the course of my life it got a little bit more abstract for me. And I came to think of God sort of as a CEO, you know, they couldn't pay attention to every detail, but generally speaking, things were working the right way. But how could Jesus know what was really going on with me, and how could God answer my prayers specifically? And then I had a pastor friend who pushed me really hard on that, and so it caused me to think about how could I be convinced that God has a personal relationship with each of us through Jesus Christ. And one, it sounds corny, but it's true. On a Christmas Eve midnight mass, I prayed for a sign, help me resolve this. And on that Christmas morning, I woke up and it was like a revelation that, you know, if human beings can create a global positioning system that keeps track of billions and billions and billions of moving people and things in every millisecond, and provides precise instructions around where you ought to be going, make a legal U-turn at the next available opportunity. If people can do that, God can do that. God can keep track of us all. God can tell us where to go. We have to listen. So, I know that I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I know that God answers the prayers that He should.
That is Carly Fiorina here on the Brody File. Well, look, we have yet one more announced candidate as well. How could we forget the good doctor, Ben Carson? That's right, he made it official in his hometown city of Detroit. Now, you can be sure that out of all the candidates out there, he is going to be the one that is the least traditional. He's not a politician, and oh, by the way, he likes it that way. Here's what he told me recently at CPAC 2015. What do you expect how this media will treat you exactly? What do you expect? What are your expectations?
Well, I really don't care what they do because I'm not a politician, and I'm not going to do what's politically expedient, and I'm not going to necessarily do what they think I should do. I'm going to do what's right. And I think there is such a thing as right and wrong. And if I got elected, I don't care if I get reelected. It's not about reelection. You know, it's not something that I even want to do in the first place. So, but I do want to get our country moving in the right direction.
Ben Carson here on the Brody File. All right, when we come back, a look at this year's National Day of Prayer. Later in the show, it is Clinton versus Clinton. Find out why former President Bill Clinton says he supports Hillary's decision to rethink some of his policies on crime. Oy, the Brody File continues. And welcome back to the Brody File. You know, last week, millions of Americans gathered across the nation to pray for the spiritual state of the country. And Washington, D.C. was no exception, as members of Congress took time out to pray in this year's National Day of Prayer. Now, of course, the Brody File team had it covered. Please. And that means it's time for a Jenny and the B Block appearance.
At this church in Mitchellville, Maryland, people could drive through for prayer.
We felt this would be an opportunity to just reach out to them for a few moments as they drive on by, just like they drive up to McDonald's window.
Everyone was invited.
I'm here so I can be prayed for.
We've been able to join in prayer together, thinking about our communities, thinking about public safety.
I pray for peace, for safety, not only for law enforcement, but for the community.
The theme for this year's National Day of Prayer was, Lord, hear our cry, from 1 Kings.
Hear the cry and the prayer of your servant that is praying in your presence today.
On Capitol Hill, decision makers humbled themselves before God.
It is times like this when we bow our head in prayer.
Some presidential candidates took time to pray, including Senator Ted Cruz.
We pray for our leaders and ask that you give them wisdom.
Dr. Ben Carson was there too.
It is up to us, who are the true believers now, to stand up for what we believe, to have the courage and the faith to believe that God will get us through this difficult period.
If the believers would just take one day and everybody pray at the same time about the same, could you imagine what God would do? That's what the National Day of Prayer is about.
For the Brody File, I'm Jennifer Wishon.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Up next, the Baltimore riots. We saw the bad and the ugly. Now we take a look at some of the good that Christians are doing to bring peace to a very divided city. Next. All right, welcome back to the Brody File. You know, the recent protests in Baltimore have sparked a national debate over the over-criminalization of certain minority groups. Recently, former President Bill Clinton explained why it may be time for Hillary and members on the left and right to rethink his former stance on crime, specifically his 1994 crime bill and the three strikes law that many believe led to the overpopulation of prisons. Take a look.
My criminal justice initiative was to put 100,000 more police on the street, create more positive activities for young people, ban assault weapons, and limit the magazine size, pass the Brady bill. And the Republicans basically wanted to emphasize three strikes you're out and all that, but I wanted to pass a bill, and so I did go along with it. The problem is the way it was written and implemented is we cast too wide a net and we have too many people in prison. And we wound up putting so many people in prison that there wasn't enough money left to educate them, train them for new jobs, and increase the chances when they came out that they could live productive lives. I strongly support what she's doing, and I think any policy that was adopted when I was president in federal law that contributed to it should be changed.
Well, the debate over police treatment of certain racial groups has been heating up for a while, but it spilled over into Baltimore a few weeks ago. Of course, you know all about it. While images like this one flooded TV screens for days, several churches actually took to the streets of Baltimore to show Christ's love in the midst of it all. John Jessup with that story.
A stone's throw away from the CVS that went up in flames, businesses show their determination, picking up the broken pieces and planning to reopen their doors. For others, like Montrell Haygood in seminary school, the resolve isn't just about physical things.
Man, I ain't going nowhere. I'm not going anywhere, man. I'm here.
It's about community.
All right, bro, take them two for yourself, baby.
Hope and love.
It encourages me to see surrounding communities come in and flood us with love. I know that it's going to be hard work. I know that it's not going to be a cakewalk from here, but I am encouraged nonetheless.
Baltimore is known as Charm City, but it's the unrest and violence of the past week that has drawn media attention and outside protesters. But it has also been a call for churches and ministries to offer hope and healing to the community.
Father, take us from the four walls of the church into the outside territory.
Uproar Church, located on the city's outskirts, is one example. With food, prayer, or just a listening ear, its members show their love and support.
It was absolutely heartbreaking to see a city that so desperately needs Jesus, and to see the outcry of a people that feel like they don't have a voice.
We serve the invisible God, but I believe He gave the world a visible church.
Others, like these chaplains, traveled a little farther, and within minutes of parking their RV, had 3 people who prayed the sinner's prayer.
Never expected that to happen that quick, but God's in control, and that's what we're seeing.
It's nothing new for them. The ministry to areas of civil unrest was birthed last year in Missouri after the death of Michael Brown.
One thing we did learn from Ferguson, from the gang members, we hug people. That's who we are. We love to hug people.
Others, like Jerry Levy, are targeting the city's youth, aiming to mentor young men, asking them to don a hat as a reminder of how men used to act.
It showed that men had respect. You know, when you walked into a building, you took your hat off, but when you stepped back outside, you put your crown back on.
For Montrell, the efforts of all these different ministries show that something good can come from the bad.
I'm not going to say that it can't get any worse, but I think that this is the perfect example for the Lord to show his strength in all of this and show how powerful He is and great He is.
John Jessup reporting for the Brody File.
All right, when the Brody File rolls on, he's a cheesehead, he's a governor, and he could be the presidential frontrunner. One-on-one with Scott Walker next. And welcome back to the Brody File. All right, well, look, we are all waiting for Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker to announce that he is running for president. It is pretty much a foregone conclusion. I mean, look, he's been campaigning around much of the country, including showing up at events like the Iowa Faith and Freedom Get-Together. The Brody File had a chance to sit down and get together with the big cheese of Wisconsin. Governor Walker, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you again.
Yeah, again. Here we are again. Look, the other day I was talking to Lindsey Graham. He was like, oh, 91.5% chance I'm running for president. Only Lindsey Graham, right? Where are you in this process? You know, everybody's waiting for you to declare, and they're kind of putting that, they love to put that front runner or at least co-front runner status on you. What are you making of all this?
Well, 2 things. One, most important thing I do as a governor every 2 years is a state budget. That budget should be completed and signed by June, so I want to get that done with before I announce any intention one way or the other. And secondly, even at that point, I still think we're a bit of an underdog just because Governor Bush, who's a friend and a good guy, but I think ultimately is going to be the front runner because of the money. He's going to have a lot more money than anybody in this race. If we get in, we're going to try and make a case on the ground.
Tell me a little bit about where you see this country going. You know, we heard Marco Rubio talk about a new American century. What might be a potential campaign theme, campaign slogan for a Scott Walker presidential run?
Well, I think more than anything, what I hear Americans want is someone who fights and wins for everyday American. Someone, you know, a lot of good people on our side who fight the good fight. There's a lot of people who have won elections before. But right now, I don't see anybody in this race or anybody else thinking about getting in who has fought the good fight on issue after issue after issue, common sense conservative reforms, and won. Not just won elections. In our case, we won 3 elections in 4 years in a state that hasn't gone Republican since '84. But I also mean, more importantly, win in substance on the issue.
Social Security, Chris Christie the other day comes out, means testing, absolutely, he says. I know Lindsey Graham believes in means testing. What's the prescription to fix Social Security in this country? What's your view?
Well, should we get in, we'll lay that out in greater detail. But I will tell you, just in principle, just as a concept, because to me, if I'm a candidate at some point in the future, I'm going to lay out detailed plans on this and a whole series of other issues. But I think a guiding principle, concept for me, is that, I was born on November 2nd, 1967. And so the reason I say that is anyone older than me should be protected. The sense should be, hey, you made plans for your retirement, no matter who you are, no matter what your background, or no matter what your income. You made decisions about your retirement based upon a commitment that the government had made. A commitment to people to say you work this many years under the system and that ultimately this is where Social Security and Medicare are going to be at. I think those individuals should be protected going forward. For people my age and younger, we live in a whole different world. We live in a 401k society. We're ready for reform. I think we think it's realistic that for not just ourselves, but our children and someday our grandchildren, that we put in place reform. So should we get in this race for president at some time after we make the announcement one way or the other after the June budget, certainly entitlement reform would be a part of that.
That was Governor Scott Walker here on the Brody File. All right, when we come back, an oy vey moment starring, narcissistically, the Brody File itself. You don't want to miss it. It's next. And welcome back to the Brody File. We take a lot of trips across the country here on the Brody File in order to bring you interviews and events directly from the newsmakers themselves. But look, it's not all glitz and glamour. Take a look at some of the road bumps and outtakes from recent Brody File road trips. It is this week's Oy Vey Moment of the Week. By the way, speaking of serious, Peter or Peter? I mean, Peter or Pete?
See, you just said both names the same. I didn't. Peter
Is it Peter
or Peter? Honestly.
Did I really just say that? Uptown Funk, Bruno Mars. Oh my gosh, you're right. See, this is what happens when I need a haircut. Oh, now I'm gonna say that. Oh my gosh, give me another hairpin. I'm hot. It's like a rainforest in here, where candidates come here to potentially do something that I'm ad-libbing about. Out cue. All the fun and mishaps of a Brody File road trip. All right, that does it for this week. Until next time, everybody, God bless. Have a great week.